Hi everyone, this is Laura. If you're a podcast listener, there is a podcast I'd like to introduce you to. Best of the Left is a curated podcast by Jay Tomlinson. Every week, he culls through all sorts of content from across the progressive pod universe around a particular topic. The Laura Flanders Show is often included. Jay's compilation is a great way to keep abreast of all that's coming out from the progressive pod world, and a way to discover new voices and podcasts that might interest you. Finding and sifting through all of that can be daunting in this digital age, like a needle in a haystack. Considering how much is out there, Jay is doing us a real favor. He really hones in on the heart of the matter and gives us a single topic seen from a variety of angles. Like the Laura Flanders Show, you can follow Best of the Left for free anywhere you get your podcasts. And let us know what you think by posting a comment in our social media feed. Now on with this week's show. 1, 2, 3.
The following is a Laura Flanders Show audio exclusive.
2022 will go down in history for the number of anti-trans bills introduced into state legislatures and the successful passage of many of them. Over 300 bills banning books, medical treatment, even access to the bathroom were introduced in 2022, and the ACLU's weekly tracker, well, it can barely keep score. And as extremists crank up the volume on hate, trans people, especially trans women of color, are facing an onslaught of violence. Today's guest is the producer of a podcast miniseries called The Anti-Trans Hate Machine, a plot against equality, which traces the people and the money that got us to this place. She is Imara Jones, the creator of TransLash Media, a cross-platform journalism, personal storytelling, and narrative project which seeks to shift the culture, create empathy, and save lives. Her views on the intersection of gender identity and racial justice landed her on the front page of Time Magazine in 2020 for her piece, Why Black Trans Women Are Essential to Our Future. And in 2019, she chaired the first ever United Nations high-level meeting on gender diversity. Prior to all of that, of course, Jones held economic policy posts in the Clinton White House. So there you have it. Imara Jones, welcome to the program. Glad to have you. Just to ground ourselves in this moment, who or what is top of your mind as we're talking, Imara?
I think who is top of my mind are the components of the anti-trans hate machine, are the people that have been working for the past decade and more to get us to this moment where trans people are in the target and a central target of the right wing. This is part of a plan. This plan has been, as I said, years in the making. There have been hundreds of millions of dollars that have flowed into the components of the anti-trans hate machine. There's an understanding by the people, the politicians, the organizations, and the billionaires that trans people will be the next fight in the gender wars after what they anticipate and have anticipated for over a year to be their victory on abortion rights. And so I think that what people have to understand is that the conversation around trans people is not marginal. It's central to the agenda and the plan for the right. And I think that for people who are progressives or who want to have a society in which we are able to have equality for everyone, need to understand that trans rights and the conversation over trans people and gender overall is not marginal, it's central. And people, if they want to have a different country, should start acting like it.
Well, let's talk about it. I mean, you talk about the anti-trans hate machine being a plot against equality. Can you lay that out for us? And can you name some names? Who is really responsible? Mm-hmm. What's their agenda?
It's a plot against equality because for a long time, people on the right have understood that control over bodies is central to the ability to implement the country that they want us all to live in. And therefore, the people that exercise body autonomy are central to their plans. And the organizations that are driving this anti-trans hate machine are very familiar names. They are and include organizations like the Heritage Foundation, the Alliance Defending Freedom, the Focus on the Family and the Family Research Council, who all come together to start a brand new anti-trans initiative called Promise to America's Children. And all of this is being funded by a network of billionaires who understand what is happening here. And those names include Betsy DeVos and her family, the DeVos Prince clan. They include other families like the Wilkes of California, lots of billionaire families that people may not have heard about. And one of the largest foundations in the country, which is the National Christian Foundation, which gives out $1.5 billion nearly each year to causes, making them the single largest funder of anti-LGBTQ hate in the country. And all of their views and what they're doing have been poll tested and focus grouped. And so this is the result of a lot of effort. And there's an entire part of the Heritage Foundation called the DeVos Center, named after Betsy DeVos's father-in-law, who was a font and has been a font of anti-trans legislation and governing. And the people who ran that were moved into the Trump administration, which was really the beginning of institutionalizing and then thinking about how to turn the government against trans people. So we have money, we have nonprofit organizations, we have government and institutional capture within officialdom. We have focus groups and the ability to be able to think about messaging. And all of those things have been brought together to bring us to this moment. It's a very, very intricate, well thought out, overlapping enterprise.
So you could look at it and say, okay, our country is rooted in genocidal violence against Native Americans, in slavery, control of bodies, enforced motherhood. So it's in some ways not surprising that we're still dealing with these things. But why do the folks that you've mentioned care so much? Why is this such a cutting edge for them right now?
Because they built an entire operation that is mobilized around the issue of gender for abortion rights. And there's an understanding on them that in order to continue to have people mobilized with respect to money and voters and grassroots energy and organization, that they're going to have to give them something new to do. And that something new to do is to focus on trans people. For example, we're already seeing doctors that treat trans people being targeted just like abortion doctors. That's a new thing that just started this year. And they are seeing how that plays out, the impact of that. And if that works in certain places, then it's going to be expanded. It's not going to be limited. And so I think that that's one thing. And the second thing is that they have a very clear view of the type of country that they're building, and it is built upon control. And a fundamental part of control is the control of people's bodies. If you're going to institute a certain vision for them, that means control over people's bodies. And so trans people are a fundamental threat to that view of the world, which is why they're so focused on it, which is why they care about it so much. And it is a deeply held belief. I think that people need to understand that the motivation to target, and partially may be cynical and smart, but these are deeply held beliefs that people are willing to fight for and that they have put hundreds of millions of dollars behind and countless hours and energy thinking about.
You're speaking to a theme that has run through so much of our programming already this year, whether we spoke with early in the year, we spoke with Suzanne Farr and Beth Ritchie, then the right-wing researcher Lisa Graves, and just a few weeks ago, Congressman Jamie Raskin. They all talked about this sort of extremist push for control and against democracy. Do you agree that there are also links to the insurrection of January 6th and the effort to strike back voting rights?
Well, we know that there are intersections between white nationalist groups and those focused on and concerned about trans people and the control over our bodies. We know that for a fact. As a matter of fact, the president of the Southern Poverty Law Center, Margaret Fong, told me in an interview that one of the fastest, no, I'm sorry, told me that, one of them. Mari told me that one of the fastest growing areas of hate that people are not focused on, but which is of ever-growing concern, is this intersection between white nationalist groups and their growing obsession over gender and gender identity. They see it as central to the white nationalist enterprise, again, rooted in body autonomy. And there are already some intersections between the Proud Boys, for example, and those who are focused on trans people and gender identity, and even more links as you delve deeper into the dark corners of the internet. So this is a growing problem. And I have an unfortunate feeling in my gut that we will at some point see this turn violent. And we already saw this, as you know, just within the recent, I don't know how to frame time.
Right. We don't know what will even, which next shooting will have happened between now and the time we broadcast. But
so I'll say, we know, for example, in the most recent shooting in Texas, that within hours of the shooter being identified, that their photograph was doctored to make them appear as if they were a person who was trans, therefore linking to the obsession on the right with trans people somehow being involved in harming children. And that lie was repeated the very next day after that shooting by a GOP congressman. And those photographs first appeared on 4chan, which we know was instrumental to the Buffalo shooters' radicalization and the plans that they executed. So I think that there are clearly darker clouds on the horizon with these links between people who are obsessed with the violent overthrow of our government to implement a white nationalist ideology and their focus on trans people and trans communities.
I hate to do it so bluntly, but what grade would you give our sort of movement resistance so far? And I don't just mean the LGBTQ plus movement, but all those who claim to be defenders of democracy and supporters of rights in this country.
Right. I think it has to be writ large, right? I think as you ended it, to expand that, an F. It's not even a question. The failure to grasp these links, the failure to understand the components of what are happening on the right, the failure to understand the energy, the focus, the money, the coordination, the drive. And as I tell people all the time, if you're just now beginning to focus on the intersection of trans people and growing far-right ideology and its impact on the rest of us, then you are already 10 years and hundreds of millions of dollars behind the right. So if you're just starting to think about it, you're already at a tremendous deficit. So I think it's an F.
This is the Laura Flanders Show. I'm Laura. My guest is activist, economist, and award-winning journalist Imara Jones. She's the founder and CEO of TransLash Media, a cross-platform journalism investigative and narrative project, which seeks to shift the culture and save lives. Imara Jones is also the producer of the podcast miniseries, The Anti-Trans Hate Machine, a plot against equality, which details the forces driving the anti-trans backlash in the U.S. You can watch this episode and see Imara Jones in action, as well as clips from different projects produced by TransLash Media on our YouTube channel, as well as on over 300 public television stations around the country. And while you're there, sign up for our weekly newsletter to get information on all of our streaming extra events and web specials, including the upcoming podcast release of the full uncut conversation. And lastly, you can find my last interview with Imara Jones and more of our LGBTQ coverage in our archives. Check it all out at lauraflanders.org. Next, I ask Imara what we can do against the political and cultural backlash that we're facing on just about every front. We'll also hear some clips from TransLash Media and get a taste of what they're doing to look into the future of gender equity. But first, here's Making Sense Stop by Charlotte Adigeri and Bolis Pupil from their new super synth sonic album Tropical Dancer, courtesy of Soul Wax's Dewey Records.
To say goodbye and let the words flow. Embrace the silence, it's all said and done. You need to welcome your intuition. Make room for your own subconscious mind. The liberty of saying nothing, but also really meaning it. Words are my refuge, silence is scary, but it is time to stop making sense.
So what do we do? I mean, I know that your project, TransLash Media, is a part of what do we do. There's a culture piece and there's the political piece. And we often say that culture precedes policy change, but it seems like they are going in divergent directions at this moment.
I think that what we need to realize is that there's a tremendous battle. And I think that you're right. I think organizationally, we work on sort of hard-edged investigative political reporting. And then we have a part that's focused on culture change. And so as an organization, that's what we focus on at TransLash and all that we do, kind of both of those things, understanding, as you say, how they interlock and work together. I think that one of the things that we can't overestimate the cultural progress that's been made for trans people, because we also know that there's a growing backlash. So we know that, for example, people with tremendous reach like Bill Maher and Dave Chappelle, who are getting, in Dave Chappelle's case, someone who received support from the highest levels of Netflix to engage in anti-trans conversation and rhetoric that puts people at risk because of the precarious nature of everything that we've been speaking about. Those people are gaining traction, along with Ricky Gervais and a growing reticence on some places to talk about trans people and engage in trans people, while at the same time growing trans visibility. We just was announced by Barbie that Laverne Cox, a Black trans actress, is going to have a Barbie. So I think that we have to understand that the cultural space is contentious and contended. So I don't think that it's not like we're making progress on culture and the politics are getting more progressive. I'm sorry, that we're making progress on culture and that's getting better there and politics are getting worse. I think that the cultural space is much more contested and fraught, which underscores what's happening in the politics. So we don't know how this is going to turn out.
It should also be mentioned that Mattel, in addition to issuing this new doll, did say that they were going to make a contribution to the nonprofit Trans Family SOS, which takes us to the question of money. You were an economist originally by training. You worked as an economist in the Clinton White House. What's the connection?
Mm-hmm. Very genuine. Very genuine. I think the connection is that money is the way in which people are able to mobilize larger sets of resources. And I think that what we have to understand about the anti-trans movement is that it is funded by billionaires. It is funded by people who have more money than you could spend in thousands of years at a normal rate. And if a collection of them are coming together to fund this, then it makes sense that we've gone from, for example, basically a half dozen anti-trans bills in 2019 to 300 this year. That's how you get that type of step function increase because of the impact of money in organization. So money is a really important part of this. And, trans organizations across the board are vastly underfunded. And also, more to the point, other places that are part of supposedly progressive networks and communities are also vastly outgunned and not focused on trans issues. A lot of places, for example, don't have trans people on staff. so can't even make basic decisions. So I think that there are some fundamental weaknesses of in the infrastructure, money being a key one, that is driving kind of this moment. And until these structural things get fixed and addressed, then the momentum is going to be with the right. It's just fundamental.
And what can you tell us about trans resistance at this point? Mutual aid, fighting back. There is that side of the picture too.
I think that goes to the heart of what the hope here is. For me, when you were saying, what can we do? I think that this is a part of it, is to find the local people that are fighting this. So for example, Tent in Texas is a very small group. I think there are 4 full-time people for a trans organization that's supposed to be helping to stem the tide statewide, that needs help. And that's replicated across the board. So there are trans organizations, as you say, fighting back. There are mutual aid societies that are figuring out ways to get medication and support for trans people who need gender affirming care, and in places where that's becoming harder, helping those people travel to places where they can get that care. There is a growing understanding on trans legal organizations to begin to lean more into this fight and battle. And there's just a growing recognition of the overall threat to our community. I think that for a long time, it's very easy, because there's been anti-trans sentiment forever, it's very easy to just say, oh, well, that's just the normal thing that's going on. And I think that people are now in our community understanding that the threat is much more serious and much more focused, and beginning to focus on that, actually in part because we're told of our series. I also want to say that also part of the hope are trans youth. As I tell people all the time, sometimes the only thing that's standing between our community and total disaster are trans youth and their families who decide that they're going to speak up and speak out. And I am talking about people, and I'm talking about people who are as young as 12, 13, 14, 17, who get together with their families and go to hearings and decide that they're going to speak out, or they decide to organize rallies. And it's their voices that in some cases have been able to halt this legislation. So I think the seeds of hope are there. They need to be watered and they need to be helped.
If people want to see Emmett Schilling from Tent on our show, they can look in our archives. Certainly a seed of hope right there. This is always a corny question, but I mean, I have heard Dean Spade for decades saying we need to look at our justice as something that trickles up, not trickles down. We have to put the most vulnerable first, learn from, be educated by, led by in our movements. And yet we're still here, and you're still calling on people to connect while the right is busily knitting everything up into one large, huge mallet to whack us with. How do you advise people that feel exasperated, frustrated, or just plain old depressed in the state of this moment, at this state of play?
I think to understand that these conversations in American history take place over a long period of time. I often think about the fact that, for example, none of the women who started the suffragette movement lived to see the movement that they started succeed. Not one of them. It was either their daughters or in some cases their granddaughters who were the ones who were around. So I think it's changing our vision. We live in a consumer transactional culture where if things don't happen immediately or in a short period of time, it's somehow seen as a failure, or we get frustrated or we get distracted. And we have to understand that one of the things that the right is doing, and I'm just referring to it as a political movement right now, is they understand that these fights are long, that there are going to be some victories and losses, but the most important thing is to keep going and to learn from their mistakes. And so I think that there has to be an attitude adjustment, in part amongst people who are concerned about social justice, about how to approach these and how long it's going to take, and just beginning to think about sustainability. I think the second thing is we haven't implemented none of what you said. There's not been an inversion of leadership. There's not been an inversion of resources. There's not been a fundamental thinking and reworking about how to make these fundamental changes. And so until what I just described and what you mentioned happened, then I think that, again, the momentum is going to be with the right. And it is frustrating. It is frustrating that we haven't made these changes. But a lot of times I think progressives and progressive movements think about elections, and specifically federal elections, as the answer, whereas that's not it, right? The political machine works on who shows up and who stays engaged, not who wins the last election. And I think there just has to be a fundamental reworking of the way in which social justice movement thinks about itself and organizes itself.
We could talk about many things, and I'm dying to talk to you about media per se and its role in all of this. And maybe we can get to that before we close. But I do want to put people back in the picture here. We talk about the number of bills. We talk about the number of attacks. Are there stories you've gathered in TransLash, in the narrative side, that have surprised you, moved you, that you might want to share?
There are probably countless ones. Not probably, there are countless ones. I think about the story of Finn, who is one of the people that we profile in our series, who is now 17 years old, was 16 last year, turned 16 last year. And Finn is one of these people who has decided to speak out in Alabama against these bills at a tremendous cost to him and his family, mainly the fact that he doesn't get to be a teenager. He doesn't get to be a teenage boy. That instead he has to fight for his fundamental humanity at an age where that should never be possible. And I think about Finn's mother, Trace, who stays up late at night thinking about whether or not their family should move out of Alabama, where they would move, how they would make ends meet, how she's going to make sure that her kid gets the care that he needs in order to survive. Because we know that children who don't get gender affirming care are put at risk, have a 40% greater chance of suicide than those who don't. Than those who don't. So I think that one of the things that keeps me hopeful are those individual stories of people who, despite the odds, get up every day and are deciding to confront this vast operation. It is the single acts of quiet bravery that trans people commit every day by getting up and walking out the door and being themselves, I think, which are incredibly inspirational.
Well, I want to encourage everyone to check out TransLash. There's more on that media platform than we've even been able to touch on here, but I urge you to check it all out. And Imara, I'm just going to end by asking you the question we often ask people on this program as we close, which is, what do you think will be the story the future tells of this moment?
It's so funny. I just thought of a line from Game of Thrones, which is that everyone wants to know their future until they hear it. So I don't know. I think that I'll tell you what I hope is the case. What I hope is the case is the result of two things. First, that this is the moment that people begin to understand that if they want a society in which everyone can thrive, including trans people, that there has to be a growing engagement and focus on the plight of trans people and trans rights, because that is a connection and the focus that, as we've spoken about, the right wing has made and is making. So I hope that this is the moment where that begins to change, where that focus comes into sharper relief, and that kind of the cloudiness that we've existed in goes away. I think secondly, the thing that I hope is the case is that all of the ideation that trans people are now focused on in terms of thinking about our futures and thinking about a future and a world that works for everyone, that all of that energy and visioning and work comes into full realization. One of the things that we did at TransLash was to do a documentary called The Future of Trans, where it's just trans people imagining their futures and talking about what the future looks like. And there's so much energy in our community in that, perhaps more than any other. And if those two things are able to be fully realized, then it's going to be a bright future for everyone.
I love to think of that bright future, and our bodies will be a part of it. Don't forget, we can't have a bright future without our bodies, people.
Bodies are the first side of liberation. Bodies are the first side of liberation.
Bodies are the first side of liberation. Well, I want to thank you so much, and thank you for all that you do at TransLash. I encourage people to check it out. And we're going to go out with a quick in memoriam from Urvashi Vad, the intersectional movement leader who we both knew and loved, and who had taught her entire career that our movements need to intersect, need to understand the connections, and need to keep a clear focus on the right. She also truly enjoyed pleasure and fun and punk rock and Patti Smith. She headed up the NGLTF, the task force, back in the early 1990s, and was the first to confront then President George Bush, the first, during his first AIDS policy speech. Urvashi Vad talked to me in 2012 with her partner, Kate Clinton, for the book that she had just released called Irresistible Revolutionaries. They were too. Here's Urvashi.
Well, I think I got involved in the 70s because as a child in the 60s, I mean, I was 12 in 1970. But the context was so alive, and social movements were everywhere you looked if you were paying attention to the news, as I was. I was always interested in politics, so I paid attention and I read the paper as a little nerd. And
Really?
I really was. I was a little nerd, and I read the paper with thick Coke bottle glasses and long Indian hair. And I was drawn to those who were in the anti-war movement and the civil rights movement. But of course, I was too young to be any part of anything in this upstate New York town where I was growing up. But at school, at college, I got involved in the anti-apartheid movement as part of that student wave of activism that was working on divestment. And I really feel that and exposure to the women's liberation movement on campus and in books and pamphlets and the bookstores and just changed my life. It made me want to change the world. It made me have an outlet for the sense of outrage that I think I always had.
If there was one thing that you think would make a major difference, either to our movements or to our society right now, that we could actually accomplish in our lifetimes?
I think criminal justice issues are a priority that are really important in the United States, but I think around the world too. Every country has its own version of it. We over-criminalize people here, decarcerating people. I'm not an abolitionist, but a lot of my friends are. I mean, and I'm open to that critique because it makes me think, whom do we need to imprison? Why do we use imprisonment? The death penalty, anti-death penalty movement is growing, and that's critical. So there's a lot of things in the criminal justice space that could be done that would be very valuable. The second thing that I would love to see in my lifetime is actually very nerdy, and it's a shift in business schools, okay? Mm-hmm. And here's why. We're left with, at this moment, I mean, one of the differences between me as a 20-year-old and me as a 55-year-old is that I now believe that the only thing that we have is that we can work for is socially responsible capitalism. Back then, I wanted to overthrow and abolish capitalism and replace it with socialism. Now I really believe that socially responsible capitalism is the name, contradictory though it may be, that I give to the concept of what we need, the double bottom line or the triple bottom line of valuing, can we do good and make a profit? Can we make things happen that are good and beneficial for the environment, good for people who are workers, and enable whoever is the owner of the means of production to make their, profits? Well, we can, but not under the current system. Not under a system that allows, uncontrolled accumulation and consolidation of wealth and power. So business schools are producing waves upon waves of young people who are going into these paths and running businesses. And I think if we can change the economic value system that is being taught to people who run businesses and who work in these big businesses, because I don't think that the person, I think we could really make a difference.
The real world, the way the real world works is not so great right now.
The way the real world works is outrageous and horrible. And we can
that's
change it.
why I think, I have always felt that what we need to do and everybody should feel comfortable doing is we have the right to laugh. And I think that a lot of times when you're listening to somebody, I've been encouraging people to do this, when you're listening to somebody tell you the biggest pile of pookie you've ever heard, that you listen very carefully and then just go, oh my God, that's hilarious. Oh my God, you mean it. And I mean, I think that they never say those lines again with any degree of confidence.
People can see your commentaries, the blogs.
For more information on this week's show, check out our show notes, which we post every week to patreon.com. Yep, go to patreon.com/The LF Show and find links to related articles and all the information that we research to put together the program. It's also where you'll get links to past episodes from our archives that relate to the topic and an invitation to watch the premiere every week on YouTube and chat in live time real with me, Laura Flanders, Sundays 11:30 a.m. Eastern. While you're there on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe. And if you're joining us on Patreon, think about becoming a contributor. Those who participate in the funding of this program keep us free on public television, community radio, and as a podcast. Don't forget, commercial media get their bills paid by delivering the public to advertisers. We don't do that. To the contrary, we deliver people to each other. But we can't do it for free. So help us defray our costs by becoming a Patreon partner, committing a monthly $3 or $5 or $10 a month, whatever's comfortable, at patreon.com/The LF Show. Become a member, a Patreon partner. We thank you. Till the next time, stay kind, stay curious. For the Laura Flanders Show, I'm Laura.